How much do you think a beautiful garden like this costs to create? The answer might surprise you. The owner has spent virtually nothing. Chip and I are going to walk through Ron's garden and explain in detail how to create a beautiful landscape full of mostly free and a large number of native plants. Hi, Ron.
Hello there, John. Hey, you're finally here.
So we've heard this rumor that a lot of the plants that you've grown here were free.
That's right. Let's take a walk around and look at the plants. Right here we have these red poppies, which I believe are called Flanders poppies. And they've been growing in the yard voluntarily for about 25 plus years. They came from down the street from Alan Amond. His grandfather brought these seeds back from the Acropolis during World War I.
Wow.
These are something that just keep on giving. They keep on coming back. Every flower will make a pod. And in that one pod, you've got probably 200-300 seeds. And they're about the size of not even a pinhead. They're just like dust. Right there, you're probably looking at 500,000 seeds that you can give to people. And then what I do is you spread out your risk. So I'll take seeds and I'll put them in many different places because plants don't always grow where we want them to grow. They grow where they want to grow.
So if you want to do this yourself, one of the easiest ways is free seeds from friends or from plants that seed themselves.
This is a lavender. I think it's called a spike lavender. And a friend of mine had this one plant left that his landlord pulled out of the ground, and he salvaged it. And this is actually a cutting that I made from what he had. There's no end to how long you can do this. And, trying to root one of these at the right time of the year, and I'll just cut the top off it. You don't want a lot of green. Take something off the bottom. And that's probably too much green. I might put some rooting hormone, but I get it into a sandy kind of peat moss mixture, and I'll keep it moist, and especially in the springtime, late winter. And once I see it starting to grow, I'll know it's probably putting on roots. But again, half the time it doesn't work and half the time it does, trial and error.
This is called propagation by rooted cuttings. There are different preferred rooting mediums. Ron mentioned his favorite.
I get it into a sandy kind of peat moss mixture.
There is some variation depending on the plant you're going to try to root. There's a lot of information online about the best formulas to use. Is that the same technique you used for growing this geranium?
Yes, I was coveting this geranium I saw over, I guess I can say it's over on Shields and Maroa. And I've been looking at it for years, and I finally went over and took a small cutting off of it and rooted it. That one, I think I put in some water for 2 or 3 weeks until it started initiating roots.
Okay, so.
But you can do that. You can put it into a soil medium. Over here is a yellow Aquilegia. I'm pretty sure I got that at about 11,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada.
Wow.
I believe it's Aquilegia chrysantha. It'll be done blooming in a few weeks, and then it'll just kind of hang low all summer, and then next winter it'll start growing again. So I've got a couple of those in the yard. That was one of those free things that if you don't mind collecting seeds. A couple other natives, and again, this was when I started from seed. It's getting a vine growing over it, but this is a spice bush, Calicanthus. The camera can't smell it, but it's got a really good smell. They describe it as a wine barrel. Back over here, this big, tall, 9-foot one, that is a bush lupin, which is very common in our foothills and near along the rivers. He's about 15 years old, and they don't live a long, long time, but they reseed like crazy, and that's from a seed also, and I've got some others in the yard that are all from seeds. Down here on these rock walls, which I also collected this rock from road cuts. Again, I didn't go on and quarry it out of public land, but it's fallen off the hillsides and it's in the gutter along the road. This is a Dudleya. This is a succulent, which is really drought tolerant, and they like to grow in cliffs. I've taken cuttings off of cuttings because they'll have multiple trunks, and I've put them in the rock wall. This kind of reminds me of the places I like to be. So when I come out in my yard, I feel like I'm a bit in the mountains. It's not what I would call a low maintenance yard. I mean, you gotta want to do it. And I suppose when I get too old, there'll be a day when I won't want to do it. But for now, it's still enjoyable. It's not as easy as having just a lawn or DG with a couple of yuccas or agaves or something like that. But if you're really into gardening and you want to try things, it can be really enjoyable.
some people promote this concept of native plants as a low maintenance approach to landscaping because their thinking is they grow in nature, nobody does anything, so you put them in your yard and you don't have to do anything.
Right. First of all, a lot of natives that I have in my yard might not survive if they got no water at all.
But it requires you to know about the plants, know what they like, what they don't like, and then manage them. And maybe that's even more than if you went to a local nursery, and just bought what everyone else is buying.
That's right.
Ron also got these grapevines for free.
Because you want shade, right? And so I've got this arbor here, so to speak. Growing on it is a Concord grape. My wife and I were in Cambria, and there was a nursery there with this big old grapevine growing over into the parking lot, and it was fall, and these leaves were just scarlet red. And I said, gee, I want to grow that. So I cut off a piece of the woody stem, brought it home, rooted it, and that was about 10 years ago. And so now it's this very sturdy vine growing up all across. And it seems to do well in the valley, better than the Thompson, because the Thompson seems to get mites and fungus a lot more, requiring a lot of care. This one will stay pretty nice and green all the way into the fall. And then down here, this little dangerous guy here, this is the Joshua tree that you see in the Mojave Desert. Probably about 100 years after I die, this will be a very tall Joshua tree. But it's got really sharp spines, so you don't want to put it where people are walking.
And the way you propagated that is interesting.
Yeah, I found the pod when I was hiking in the desert, and I brought the one pod back, and it had a high germination rate. It's easy to germinate. I stratify them in the refrigerator for a month or two. Basically, you take a Ziploc bag and you put the seeds in a wet paper towel, put it in there, leave it for a couple months. When you open it up, there's a root coming out, and then you plant that into a small pot.
Seed stratification is a way that you can mimic nature, and usually most of the stratification involves cold. So putting it in a refrigerator, or even alternating a freezer and a refrigerator, kind of like what we're doing is getting the seed ready for spring. That's a simplification. Some stratification even involves heat, and sometimes you heat it first, then you go through the cold treatment. And it depends on the specific species, and there's lots of variations. You can look up specific plant names and how best to stratify their seeds.
And here's a confession, I did not get this saguaro cactus from seed or for free. A friend sent it to me as a gift. So does that count as no cost?
Yeah.
I mean, if they give it to you?
That's free.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. If you are enjoying this tour of Ron's yard and want to explore more content about getting creative in the garden, then subscribe to our channel. It's free. Ron planted this grove of Platanus racemosa, which maybe is a little too big for your yard, but spectacular. It's a native sycamore in California, but along waterways, right?
That's right.
So you have to water that.
I find that because I have this deck out here and I have chairs out here, I meet neighbors, and it gives a sense of community. Yeah. Because a lot of people cocoon, they come home from work, they go in their house, and even on this street, I won't see people for years. I know they're alive, but I'm sitting out here, I see people walk by, I talk, they say they like the stuff, the yard, and some people don't say it because they think the yard is not something they'd want. Mm-hmm. But it's a way of connecting with the community by having living space in the front yard of your house.
I'm always trying to encourage people to do exactly that.
Along a road cut up in the foothills this winter, I found a little bit of an avalanche and some ferns broke loose. And this is one of them right here. This is a maidenhair fern, which is native to moist areas in the lower canyons.
Really? Maidenhair fern is native to California?
Oh, yeah. There are quite a few on the Upper Kings that you got to find shady, north-facing slopes where that's very moist. This is a chain fern, Woodwardia fimbriata, yeah. This is a Chinese tallow, and a lot of people don't like them because they say they surface root, they drop berries, they're invasive. If I lived in the mountains, the foothills, I wouldn't plant one of these. But in Fresno, it's not going to get too far. The leaves kind of quake like an aspen, and aspens don't want to grow in Fresno, so this is the closest thing, and it has a lot of nice color. I may rue the day that I planted this here when it starts to fruit and drops everything, but we'll see what happens. So on the deck here, I've got a collection of succulents, most of which I got from people who have succulents. They're really easy to grow. You just don't want to overwater them. So I water these like once a week, once every 2 weeks.
Succulents is a good way to start. They are one of the simplest usually to propagate. You can just make cuttings of the succulent, put them in soil, keep the soil moist. In about 3 weeks, they'll start to form roots.
And so, you know, you'll get a cutting like this that breaks off, and, you know, you take off a bunch of the leaves on the bottom, try not to break the stem off, and you put that into some growing medium, you know, something that succulents like to grow in, gravelly, perlite, that sort of thing, and water it once a week, and it'll start rooting, and then you have free succulents. Well, when you retire and you no longer have real purpose in life, and there are children walking by, you find your dog's toys laying about the living room floor, and you get tired of that. So what you do then is you take them and you hang them up in the tree so that children can walk by and enjoy it, yes. And it's not a native, but here's something that has an interesting story, at least for me. This is a plum tree, and my wife and I were in Cambria at this little green park where there's a history of Chinese immigrants who lived there, and this is a little plum tree, and we ate some of the plums off of that tree, and I brought some of the seeds home and I put them in a pot, and it took 2 years for the seeds to break their dormancy. And now this is about a 5-year-old tree, and it's got little plums on it. This is native right here. It's not blooming now, it'll be blooming in August. California fuchsia. That again, I got from seeds when they bloomed in the foothills, and it spreads, it goes where it wants to go. You know, you have to be kind of a native plant nerd to appreciate this maybe, but this is a monkey flower, and it's blooming this year. This is a cutting I took just last fall from around the Kings River. I took a cutting and rooted it, and I just planted it out the other day. And this plant will get about 2 feet tall if it's happy there.
It's the best yard on the block right there.
Hey, thank you. I get that once in a while. This big homely tree trunk right here is a California native that I started from a seed. I think I got it at the Discovery Center because they had a big chalopsis there. That's native to southeastern California. And it got very large, and then it split, and I was gonna pull it out, and I cut it back severely, and it started shooting back new branches. So I'm gonna leave this guy, and let's see how well he does. He's getting ready to bloom, and he'll be covered with purplish pink flowers most of the summer. And he doesn't use much water at all. He has no water actually on him at all.
So basically, all the free plants in your yard come down to 3 things: cuttings, divisions, and seeding. I know this is a video about free plants, but on some of these plants, Ron brought up the Flanders poppy, you can buy 10 seeds for $4 or $5, and then you can divide them from there or grow more from seed, or, you know, lots of different ways to multiply them from that point on.
Start small, you know, if you're not so sure, take a section of your yard, one area, and try that, and see how it works. And again, remember, as much as I grow in my yard, to be totally honest, I half jokingly say half of what I plant doesn't survive, but the stuff that does survive, you know, usually does really well. So start small, and read all you can about, you know, these things, and then if you feel confident with what's happened, then you can expand if you want.
So Ron, these John and Bob's products are a gift. Thank you very much for the tour. We appreciate it. And these products will align very nicely with the style of gardening you're doing here.
Thank you, I appreciate it very much.
These are not, you know, your typical chemical fertilizers. Yes. These are all organic, and they're more focused on building life in the soil than anything else.
My dog is really interested in this, as you can see.
Look at Juno, pay attention. Free plants are just the beginning. The next part comes in designing your landscape. Check out this tour of Steve's yard, where he designed and installed a landscape spending almost no money. Just hard work, some salvaging, and creativity.